Good afternoon and welcome to Greater Indiana Clean Cities Propane Autogas Answers webinar. My name is Kaylee May, the Events and Communications Coordinator for Greater Indiana Clean Cities. Thank you for joining us in collaboration with our partners, the Propane Education and Research Council, PERC, Midwest Transit Equipment, and Co-Alliance as we look at the benefits of propane as a transportation fuel. Before we begin, we have several housekeeping items to mention. This webinar is being recorded, and we will send you a link to the recording after today's session is completed. All attendees are in listen-only mode. You will be able to submit your questions in the Q&A box on your screen, and at the end of the presentations, we have set aside time for questions. Finally, we have a survey at the end of the webinar for you to complete. Please take the 2 minutes to provide feedback so that we can continue to provide topics our stakeholders need. We have 3 speakers today. Stephen Whaley, Director of Autogas Business at PERC, is responsible for growing propane autogas market share in on-highway, light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicle markets. His focus is on new product research and development, product launches, maintenance, and growth of existing market segments, and finding potential new market development opportunities. Kevin Feldman is the Regional Sales Manager at Midwest Transit Equipment, the largest bus dealer in the United States, selling and servicing new and used buses all over the nation and across the world. Mark Ransom is the Petroleum and LP Sales Specialist at Co-Alliance, one of the largest agribusiness, energy, marketing, and supply cooperatives in the Midwest. We have a full agenda today, and we'll do our best to stick on our timeline. I'll begin with an overview of Greater Indiana Clean Cities, and then Stephen from the Propane Education and Research Council will give an overview of the benefits of propane, incentives, and funding opportunities. Midwest Transit Equipment's Kevin Feldman will then discuss the benefits of propane school buses, followed by a look at propane infrastructure and fuel supply options by Mark Ransom of Co-Alliance. Greater Indiana is a Clean City coalition focused on advancing communities with education and resources on alternative fuel vehicles. Our mission is to advance alternative domestic fuel transportation, including energy-efficient technologies across all sectors in Indiana. We are a standalone nonprofit 501c3 organization serving the state, working with public and private sector members. For 21 years, we have been assisting cities, schools, utilities, fueling companies, government agencies, universities, and other nonprofit organizations with their alternative fuel fleet projects. Greater Indiana has around 80 members or stakeholders that work with us on collaborative opportunities, whether it's for funding opportunities, infrastructure development, or fleet deployment. Together, we host educational and networking events, fostering opportunities for partnerships between fleets and industry providers. As you can see, we have several of our champion members listed today. We also have many leader and advocate stakeholders listed on our website. Their membership has helped fuel our work to deploy alternative fuels and technologies throughout the state, and together we're fueling the future of a Greater Indiana. Clean Cities focuses on 4 major activities, which are represented by the nodes of this web, as part of a complementary framework. Local and national partnerships. Clean Cities helps convene key community and business leaders to develop and implement projects, leverage resources, and advance local barriers through the program's coalitions. In addition, national partnerships leverage Clean Cities resources nationwide to engage with larger fleets and organizations. Information and education. Clean Cities develops data-driven tools to help consumers save money on fuel costs and help fleets understand their options for cost-effective alternatives. Technical and problem-solving assistance. Clean Cities helps local leaders address permitting and safety issues, technology shortfalls, and other project implementation barriers. Competitively awarded financial assistance. Clean Cities uses federal awards to provide funds that encourage an initial private sector match and long-term investment. This framework is bolstered by local support through designated Clean Cities coalitions like ours that have their finger on the pulse of local market conditions and priorities. Local coalitions, such as Greater Indiana, can tap national resources to provide unbiased information, tools, experts to address barriers and solve problems, national partnerships with industry and large national fleets, publicity through mass media and outreach, and financial assistance to jumpstart markets and incentivize private investment. Today's webinar features a presentation given by the Propane Education and Research Council, a nonprofit that provides leading propane safety and training programs and invests in research and development of new propane-powered technologies. Stephen Whaley, PERC's Director of Autogas Business Development, will now lead the presentation for today's webinar. And I'm going to give you access.
Thank you very much, Kaylee. I appreciate you having me, especially in light of the company that that you have here with Mark and Kevin. I'm really looking forward to working with them today in doing this. But let me before we kick off right into the Autogas portion of this, or propane, which more people are familiar with that particular name. Autogas came from actually a European term. At all the petrol stations there, they have autogas being dispensed. It's the third most popular motor fuel in the world, next to gasoline and diesel. But when we use it in the fueling of vehicles, we call it autogas. So you'll hear me say propane or autogas or propane autogas throughout. But before we start talking about autogas, I just wanted to kind of zoom up just a little bit and just get our minds wrapped around, why do we do any of this? What is the reason for making any of this happen? And so to define a successful alternative energy adoption, in other words, what was the criteria for getting rid of the horse and buggy and going to, locomotives and automobiles with a different energy source? What is it going to take to displace the 50 billion gallons of diesel that's being used in medium duty and heavy duty transportation here in these United States? We want to clean this up. We want to be effective at doing it. So how do we make that happen with electricity, with hydrogen fuel cell, compressed natural gas, propane, all of these? What defines a successful alternative energy adoption? And I've got 4 criteria for all of us to look at. Otherwise, we're just not going to be successful. We need to go home and work on it and figure it out before we come back to the table. So with that, it has to be cleaner than gasoline and diesel. That's a given. We can't bring anything to the alternative for any kind of mainstream adoption unless it's cleaner. Okay, so that has to be the case. The second is a little more challenging. It has to be cheaper than what we're doing now. And that's a pretty tall order with gasoline and diesel, especially here in these United States, because we have a very inexpensive energy source for transportation. So it has to be cleaner, it has to be cheaper, and it has to operate just as well, if not better. In other words, torque, horsepower, range, all of those things have to be met or exceeded to displace and knock that king off the hill. And then it goes without saying, the last one, you have to have a lot of this energy source. Otherwise, we won't be able to go mainstream with this and be able to dent that 50 billion gallons a year that diesel has right now. So with that, how does propane autogas line up? Well, if you wanted to do a cost comparison of NOx reductions, those nitrogen oxides that are coming out of the tailpipe of vehicles, propane will give you the most dollar for NOx reductions than any other fuel. And we'll demonstrate that as we go through. It's also the lowest total cost of ownership of any fuel, alternative or what's on the market today with gasoline and diesel. And we provide just as much horsepower, torque, and range as what we're doing with gasoline and diesel now. And the last one kind of hits the sweetest spot of this. We produced here in these United States 28 billion gallons of propane. We have more of it here in our country than all the other countries combined. We used about 9 billion gallons of it here in the United States, but we exported 19 billion gallons of propane. So we have a lot of room for growth here in adoption. And if you just kind of do the math here, I mean, we could take, you know, almost half of all of that diesel off the market today without even, going to any other whaleheads for more of it. We could just do that today. So we can certainly scale up on that as well. So with that, there we go. So what is propane? Well, it's the same fuel that we're using out on the back patio to cook our steaks and hamburgers and hot dogs on a nice day. But it's used way more than that. It is very clean. We let it touch our food, but it also heats millions of homes. It's on agricultural farms all over the country for grain drying and chicken hatchery. I mean, all of these things. Have it in off-road for commercial mowers, for yard dogs, moving terminal tractors. We have a ton of applications for this, but one of the ones I really like to point out is forklifts, because decades and decades and decades ago, before we had the EPA or any emission regulations and such, people adopted propane in an internal combustion engine for operating forklifts inside of a warehouse. And why did they do that? Well, because with gasoline and diesel, you know, people would die from the exhaust emissions that were coming out of there, and with propane they didn't. So it's really that simple. It's a super clean fuel, and we're going to discuss today a little bit more about why people are moving their fleets to this. But we have two sources of propane. The organic propane that I've been talking about, mostly the conventional propane, is one. But the other is now renewable. And we're gonna finish up our presentation today with talking about renewable and how it fits into the equation. But what I'd like to point out right now is both of them have the exact same molecular structure. They're both non-toxic, meaning that it can't contaminate any water source or air sources or anything like that. In other words, you can't spill it. Now we do add a little bit of ethyl mercaptan, a little bit of stink to it because it doesn't have any smell. So we put that smell in there so that you get a hint of any escape of propane that we don't want long before it becomes any kind of a dangerous situation. So why are fleets? This is what we're going to cover today. All of these attributes of why these things are happening. But everybody has a path to zero, okay? All of us do, or we wouldn't be in this game of trying to implement an alternative. So what is Propane Autogas's path to zero? Well, the first thing we did, and it was pretty much with the implementation of school buses on propane, we were able to get rid of a very dangerous particulate. These particulate matter that's in there. A diesel engine has to have a particulate matter filter to make their emission clean, but propane is already so clean we don't need to worry about particulate matter. The second obstacle we had to tackle was those nitrogen oxide tailpipe emissions that are extremely harmful to the respiratory system of people. So everybody has to meet the EPA and CARB emission standards. Diesel does that, gasoline does that, propane does that, natural gas. Everybody has to meet those standards. But just to let you know how far propane goes beyond those standards, the same people that busted Volkswagen for the NOx emissions scandal, West Virginia University put on their mobile emission testing equipment on the best-in-class clean diesel and the best-in-class propane autogas, which is a 0.02 NOx emission level, that ultra-low NOx emission level that actually Kevin can talk about that a little bit more on his buses. But the emissions were measured by the University of West Virginia, and they were very strict about this, just like they were with Volkswagen. And they measured these things in on-the-road routes, and it was 96% cleaner with propane than the best-in-class clean diesel. That's how much further we go down the road with removing these, and NOx, which is the most harmful to folks with respiratory illness to begin with. Greenhouse gas is our next one, and we're tackling that with several things, with new technologies in engine development, as well as what we're doing with renewable. And I'll share a little bit more of that as we go through. Fuel and maintenance cost reductions. I'm only going to touch on this a tiny bit on a national level, because Mark's going to go into this a little bit more on the practical side of infrastructure of what you can do to fuel yours. But as you can see over the years, propane has always been less than what gasoline and diesel prices have been. So what vehicles can we do on propane? Well, basically, I like saying, from a research and technology point of view, anything that runs on gasoline can run on propane. In other words, if you have a spark ignited engine, you can make it run on propane. So what are we doing over the road? We have EPA and CARB certifications for first responder vehicles, utilities, contractors, school buses, all of that. But just to give you a hint on school buses, we have the largest percentage of adoption in this market segment than any other. And of course, we're trying to provide the safest, cleanest environment for the most susceptible ones in our society, and that is small children. They're the closest ones to those tailpipe emissions, so we have to be especially careful. And all three of the major OEMs have recognized this and have propane options for all of their Type C buses. To give you a little bit of a scorecard on how we're doing, earlier this year in 2020, we surpassed the 20,000 mark for propane buses being deployed in these United States, with over 1,000 school districts and contractors adopting these. And I'll tell you, once they start, they don't stop. They see the benefits of what Kevin will be talking about here in a bit. And when schools are fully open, never thought I'd have to say that, but COVID has changed things for this year of 2020. But when schools fully open, we move over 1.25 million students to and from school every day. Now I'm picking on Bluebird here because they offer all four of these things, but I'm gonna ask Kevin some questions about the lineup that they have on the IC bus when we get to that portion. But just to put it in perspective, because I get questions all the time about how expensive is it to run something alternative. Well, we can see that a diesel price for the exact same bus equipped the exact same way on diesel, and then you see a very small incremental cost to get the great benefits of running on propane. It's about 35% more than diesel to go on the CNG side of things, but it's extremely expensive to go that electric route. And I know there's incentives out there now, but that doesn't usually last forever, especially when you can get 96% of the way there with tailpipe emissions for less than 10% of the incremental cost. That's a great value. And speaking of value, that's why Volkswagen has deployed more in the area of propane than anywhere else. The blue area here is the amount of dollars that have been invested from Volkswagen settlement to clean up those NOx emissions. And you can see we have a very right side up equation here, with the yellow area being the number of buses deployed to reduce those NOx emissions. Here's another one. This is a comparison of two states. We have the state of California and the state of Texas. Both of them have spent a good bit of money on reducing NOx emissions in their states. California has spent about 46% more at $816 million than Texas. But look at the NOx emissions reduced based on the dollars that were invested. 35 tons of 1,000 tons of NOx in California, but almost twice as much in Texas, with a lot less money. Now, why is this? Well, over the last 15 years, California has been somewhat narrow in their selection of what they would fund in an alternative, where Texas has more of an all of the above approach, kind of like what Kaylee does through the clean cities. They're fuel agnostic and such, and so the best application gets to go where it needs to produce the greatest amount of benefit. And you can see how that approach is way more effective for the dollars than when you narrow it down to say, hey, we're just going to do EV. So what are the markets that are catching up with school buses? Well, all of those markets have three things in common. They're in that mid-duty range, that class 3 through 7 weight classes. They go through a lot of fuel because, hey, if you have a cheaper fuel that's a whole lot cleaner, the more fuel you go through, the more you're going to save financially and the more you're going to displace of those harmful emissions. And it's also, our sweet spot is, you know, that regional route. We don't have to do just that last mile and just, you know, urban development. We can go like 400 miles on school buses with propane. So what are those three markets? I'm going to list three of them. Food and beverage is one of them. I think we all might be familiar with Schwann's. They have 4,000 vehicles that are operating on propane. Nestle Water started about 5 years ago with just 5 trucks. And they're now over 1,000 trucks in their fleet running on propane. And then we move into the paratransit side of things, and we actually have a very high percentage of paratransit fleets. It's a little over 10% now. Of those 25,000 paratransit vehicles that are the high capacity vans and the cutaways, we have a tremendous amount of adoption in that arena. And just to put it in perspective, the 600 gallons per month that these paratransits, because they're running, you know, all day and into the evenings, is about twice as much as what the school bus market would be doing. So you can see why there's a lot of adoption in here, because they're saving a lot on their energy costs as well as reducing a lot more emissions. And the third one is one that has all of the makings of that perfect storm. And it is the parcel and package. And I am having a little bit difficulty, Kaylee, advancing my slides. I'm not sure why that changed, if I lost control, or if you might be able to help me. I would appreciate that. There we go. Well, let me back up just one here and see if I can't make that go. All right. It is that parcel and package delivery. I think everybody probably knows about UPS's, you know, they have over 1,000 package cars running on propane, and as well as, you know, FedEx. But Kaylee, I think I've messed up again. I'm just trying to get back one slide here, and don't seem to have, there we go. All right. But the United States Mail, I don't think most people don't know that the U.S. Postal Service moves the mail via 92,000 routes. But 70,000 of those routes are actually done by independent contractors who own their own trucks, they fuel their own trucks, and they're responsible for all of those costs, and they have to meet on time. These 10,000 box trucks that are all over our country moving mail between distribution centers are being taken care of by independent contractors. And so they're moving 6.5 days a week, day and night. And now they're starting to adopt propane, one, to help, you know, the United States Postal Service meet their sustainability goals, but also because they're running so much less expensive than the diesel. These trucks are going through about 1,000 gallons of fuel a month each. So with that, they're having tremendous cost savings. And one of these contractors in the Charlotte, North Carolina area did a pilot test, which isn't uncommon for most folks to do. And she was going to do a 2-week pilot test. And I spoke with Lisa. She called me after a week and said, I'm done. And I said, well, Lisa, you promised to do 2 weeks. He goes, no, Steve, I'm done. I want 8 of them now. You know, how quick can we get these things built and made? And so she now has those and has her own infrastructure at her place. And she is a huge champion now of using propane in their box trucks. So that's a market nationwide that we're really looking forward to expanding more on. And you can see why with that kind of gallon usage. All right, Kaylee, I'm just going to let you advance my slides for me, because I'm dying over here with the control. So just to give you an example of a real case study. And when I mean about case study, I'm talking about historical forensic data. We all have calculators to calculate the future of what savings we might be able to have. But what I did recently was a 5-year case study in 3 different areas. And I just want to show off this one area. This is a Freightliner M2 on the right, which operates on diesel. And the one on the left is a Freightliner custom chassis S2G that operates on propane. And what we did was the criteria was they had to be the same model year in the same company, getting serviced at the same places, operating into the same conditions and terrain. And I wanted to find out what's the cost per mile to operate these vehicles over that 5-year period. So this slide demonstrates the maintenance cost savings as well as the fuel cost savings. So the maintenance cost savings, you can see here, we added up there were thousands of, over the 5 years, thousands of records that indicated, what maintenance was occurring, from oil changes to particulate matter filters, all of those things. And you can see that differential in the maintenance cost between the 25 cents and 37 cents. And then also in the fuel cost, we added up every gallon that went in there. And what we did is we took the EIA's $2.77 diesel average price over the last 5 years, and then compared it to the propane price over the next 5 years. And all total for maintenance and fuel costs, we had 29 cents per mile savings in this class 6, class 7 arena, which is a substantial amount of savings for a fleet. So here are all the solution providers that we have for operating vehicles on propane. And let's run through these real quick. The first one being with there we go, Roush Cleantech, not only for the school buses, but also for commercial trucks. And we'll go to the next one. There we go, Freightliner custom chassis, one that we showed the case study on. This has the DriveForce 8.8 liter engine in it, as well as the 8 liter. They have 2 different options there. We'll go to the next one. Greencraft right there in California also has one of 3 that has a 0.02 ultra low NOx. Agility in Salisbury, North Carolina, that 8.0 liter engine that we were talking about. And we'll keep going to the next slide. PSI, which is actually in Kevin's school bus that he's going to be talking about. We'll go to the next one. Alliance Autogas, as well as the next slide, which is ICOM. Both of these are aftermarket conversion systems that allow you to take existing gasoline vehicles and overlay a biofuel system to allow you to run on propane and even switch back to gasoline in the event of emergencies and natural disasters and things like that. We'll go to the next slide. And Campbell Parnell is exclusively doing just the Isuzu cab overs, and they are real popular on LKQ. I don't know if you're familiar with LKQ. They recycle more automotive parts than anybody else in the world, and they are converting their entire fleet of thousands of vehicles to operate on propane too. All right, so what's coming up? We have this so far. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. The announcements recently made have been with Cummins, the 2nd largest engine manufacturer in the world. PERC, the Propane Education Research Council, is known for our investments in technology development. And so we partnered with Cummins and funded a project, a portion of a project, for Cummins to develop a purpose-built propane engine and try and get all of the maximizing all of the really good characteristics of propane. And with that, these are the stats that we came up with. In this next slide, we have a compression ratio. Because we're able to use that 6.7 liter diesel block, we're able to do some very high compression ratios, but everything else was propane purpose built. So with high compression ratios become not just high horsepower and torque, but also high efficiencies. So the brake thermal efficiency of this engine actually matches diesel at 40%. But the horsepower and torque rating on the next slide actually is rather surprising to us and to Cummins and everybody else. That black line that you see towards the top on that curve is the best diesel around. It's the first responder diesel engine. And so it has the highest horsepower and torque in that 6.7 liter offering that Cummins has. But look at that green line on top of the diesel. That's how it operates on propane. It actually has more horsepower and torque, 375 horsepower and 880 foot-pounds of torque out of a 6.7 liter block. Now, that's just where we're starting here. That could easily go to the 9 liter, it could go to the 12 liter, and it is surpassing diesel in that scalability all the way up. And it also helps us in the next slide with our emissions. Because it's operating so efficiently, we're able to drastically reduce greenhouse tailpipe emissions as well. And we'll go on to the next slide. So the future of propane autogas, what's happening with the actual energy source? Renewable is where things are. These are the attributes of renewable propane. My favorite one is actually the low energy conversion. I won't name names, but there are some renewable energy sources that are being made that use actually 10 times the energy to make that one energy portion. Well, in renewable propane, we are a byproduct, and we'll go to the next slide. We're a byproduct of the refining of renewable diesel. So as we make more renewable diesel, a portion of that becomes renewable propane. So it doesn't take a whole lot of energy source just to pull that out of the process. REG down in Louisiana is the largest one. It's making about 5 million gallons of renewable propane a year. But we also have other refineries coming online this year and next year. I think the biggest one coming online that's been announced so far is the Phillips 66 plant in San Francisco Bay, which will be doing 35 million gallons of renewable propane from the count that they're doing on their renewable diesel. The second image off to the right is another way we can make renewable propane, and that is by blending it. Taking 80% of the recipe, if you will, of conventional organic propane, but then we take 20% of what's called renewable DME. This is made mostly from dairy farm waste. And this renewable DME has a carbon intensity of minus 278. So when we're able to take our conventional propane carbon intensity of 83, and we took the math works out to be about 11 on the carbon intensity. So it's really attractive if we're starting to measure greenhouse gases. So let's start measuring some greenhouse gases. And we're going to compare it with this next slide to the electric grid, because that's the baseline people now are using for, cleanliness. So let's start with the electric grid. The fossil fuels that are contributing to the electric grid are listed here. Coal on the left, you can see, the brighter the red, the more coal that's being used. Natural gas is extremely popular with energy grid supply. Not much on the petroleum side, unless you're going to Hawaii, and the biomass is very, very small. So let's look at some renewable sources that go into the electric grid for this next slide. We have nuclear. My home state of South Carolina, we have about 50% nuclear, so we have a very, very low carbon intensity in our state. But then hydro is a big part in the Pacific Northwest, where we have a lot of water movement, dams, and so forth. Solar is a little bit there in the California, in that western region. Wind up through the central part of the states. Not too much on the geothermal side. So if we were to combine all this together in the next slide, we're going to see a comparison of a carbon intensity on the left of propane, which ranges between 79 and 83, depending on which pad you're in, as the government defines that. That's the carbon intensity for each one of those states. Now, off to the right is the carbon intensity of the electric grid in each one of those states. So with the great state of Indiana, you can see how propane right now, the propane that Mark is delivering to school buses and everyone else in the state of Indiana is that much less in a carbon intensity than the electric grid is there. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to do 5 quick scenarios. And the first one is comparing a propane medium duty vehicle to a electric medium duty vehicle. In that school bus arena, in that box truck for the United States Postal Service that I show, that vehicle driving 200 miles a day on propane or 200 miles a day on the electric grid, charging it in their batteries. That's what we're going to measure throughout all 5 of these. And we'll go through these quickly. If you can go to the next one, please. Here is where we are with conventional propane compared to the electric version of the same vehicle. And what we're measuring here is not carbon intensity, it's actual tons of CO2. All right. So in Indiana, you can look on there, and we're actually going to be saving 64 tons of, I'm sorry, where are we at? I'm geographically challenged here, and I'm looking at the wrong state. Forgive me. But this is the delta between CO2 and measured in tons for one vehicle to one vehicle. Okay, this is just with conventional propane. So you can look in any of the states there and see how many tons of CO2 less propane would be in the green states and less electricity would be in those red colored states. So let's introduce our first level of renewable propane. This would be the next slide that shows REG with our renewable propane. We're better in every single state except Vermont, because they get all of their electricity from Canada's hydro supply there. We're better by this number of tons in every single state for doing that. So what about the Dme blend? Let's go take a look at the next slide. And this is where we mix in 20% Dme with 80% conventional propane, and it's even better in this case scenario of the CO2 greenhouse gas emissions from comparing it to that electric vehicle. All right, so let's go to the next one here. And this is our best case scenario. When we take renewable propane and we blend it with DME, this is how many tons of CO2 on a one vehicle to one vehicle comparison for each of the states, including Vermont now. But now the question you're supposed to ask me is, Steve, we have an electric grid that is getting cleaner. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and look at the future. In 2035, and every state meets their electricity grid generation goal of 95% renewable, okay? And we also want to give that vehicle a 5,000 cycle battery life, not like the 1,000 cycle life that we're doing right now. But if we take our best propane blend of what we can do today, and we compare it to the best electricity grid of 2035, we're still less greenhouse gas emissions in that whole life cycle analysis than EV. So in the next slide, we're just going to highlight and remind where the benefits of propane and renewable propane are. So with only a 15% average vehicle incremental cost, which is very, very small, we're able to achieve 96% tailpipe emissions and an extreme number of CO2 life cycle emissions. And we do this without adding any more weight to the vehicle, especially in the medium to heavy duty vehicles. There's a lot of weight that gets added in a lot of the alternatives. Propane doesn't do that. We're able to bring these benefits at a very low cost and a lot of emission reductions and cost savings to do so. And renewable propane is a drop-in. So you don't have to wait until renewable is actually real popular in your area. You can start using propane autogas today, and the same infrastructure that Mark's going to talk about and the vehicles that Kevin's going to talk about that run on propane, you can do this today and drop in renewable without changing anything. So that's our information. And I have a next slide that has a little bit more contact information, how you can go to propane.com and find out all of the things that I've said, as long as, and the references to how those numbers were generated. And I really appreciate the time that you've given me today. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Mark and Kevin from the vehicle side, as well as the infrastructure of how you get this wonderful fuel into your fleets. Kaylee, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. A lot of good stats and benefits for propane. Thank you. So next we're going to hear from Midwest Transit Equipment, the largest bus dealer in the United States, selling, servicing new and used buses. We're going to hear from Kevin Feldman, the Midwest Transit Equipment's regional sales manager. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thank you for having me, Kaylee, and fantastic, Steve. I really appreciate all the information and leading the way for us today. I keep it on a little bit more of the simple side. I know Steve likes to, give a lot of the stats out there, and I want to just follow up some of the things that he had talked about today. So on the first slide, I really like to touch on the environment part. With the VW settlement that's been divvied out to all the different states, we hit on NOx a lot, and that's what the whole VW mitigation settlement was aimed towards, reducing NOx. The other item that I really like to point out, although NOx is very important to reduce as a greenhouse gas, and we're doing so from your diesels putting out almost 12 grams per mile of NOx to now our propane's putting out to less than a gram per mile, is CO2. Carbon dioxide is another one that we really want to concentrate on being able to reduce. Going to your other alternative fuels, you can see propane cuts that CO2 emissions in half. And I think that's one thing that doesn't really get looked at a whole lot, but I think is a very important point. The great thing about propane being a fairly non-toxic fuel, if you did have an incident where you had a leak or a spill, there is no EPA cleanup. As you probably experienced at some of your facilities, if you have had a diesel spill or a gasoline spill, you have to get the SOx out and call the fire department and call EPA and have everything registered. That's not really a problem when you switch to propane. The way it dissipates, it does not pollute and get into our water system quite like the other fuel systems do. And then obviously the environmental benefit with the reducing of the greenhouse gases. Kaylee, if you could advance for me. One of the big reasons why we're pushing to propane is it's so easy to implement. Once we get marked on, he's going to give you a little bit more of a hint how easy it is to go with the infrastructure and how they're able to help along with our other vendors. But another big part of propane over diesel is in the wintertime, especially up north. As you can see, as a school bus on the side, that's actually up in Canada. We've seen a huge popularity of propane up north just because it does not require a plug-in down to -20, which is just unheard of with a diesel engine. So the ease of startup in the morning is definitely eliminating some pains that they've been experiencing. Along with that, you have a very fast warm-up, and you also have a vehicle that stays warm instead of diesel bus. As it tends to idle more, the engine will actually cool down and not supply as much heat in the vehicle. The system that we're running, the engine from PSI, is an 8.8 liter. I don't know if we have any gearheads on here. It's actually a relative of the old 496 big block. PSI bought the rights and has made some modifications to it and now made it the 8.8, which is, I want to say, somewhere around a 535 cubic inch engine now. Made some upgrades to it, but it's still a relatively simple engine setup. Finding technicians sometimes can be hard in a diesel shop. Going to a simple setup like this allows us to employ technicians that can pull from their automotive side, which I will admit, being an ex-automotive tech, is a lot easier to understand than diesel systems now today. With all the after treatments being thrown on our buses and the diagnostics required, there's a lot more to diagnosing a diesel bus versus a new propane vehicle. There's no winter front management. A lot of school buses, as you see in the wintertime, especially in our area in Indiana, have to throw on the yellow front protector to block the airflow going across the radiator to keep that engine warm. That way we can circulate the coolant in order to have the heaters work properly. That's not needed on a propane vehicle. So no longer having to replace components that usually break in a few year span, having to snap them on and off through the seasons on the front of the vehicle. Another big part of it is the emissions part. No more DOC, DPS, SCRs clogging while we're sitting there idling, waiting to warm up in the morning. You don't have to have that extended, 30-minute to an hour phase of someone wanting to letting their bus idle to warm up. Within the first 10 to 15 minutes of driving the bus, your bus is warm and stays warm. And then touching on the easier maintenance and diagnostics from earlier, he was talking about the going to propane from diesel and the savings per mile of 29 cents per mile. And I don't know if anybody broke out a calculator in that time frame when he was talking about that. Average lifespan of a bus in our area, let's just call it 125,000 miles. You got to think in the lifespan of your vehicle, that's a savings of almost $36,000. We're looking at a price increase. I believe we touched on what was a 35% increase. Yeah, in real world figures, we're talking $8,000 to $10,000 increase in the price of a propane powered bus over diesel. And over the life of the bus, you're going to be saving $36,000. Definitely something we want to look into. Now, on the next slide, if we go to the next one, Kaylee, I like to touch on what a lot of my technicians are familiar with is the list of components that we are losing going to a propane powered bus. The after treatment device, I'm sure you guys are familiar with right there on the left, losing our DOC, DPFs, SCRs. Obviously, we're going to be adding back in a catalytic converter that's on all of our motor vehicles to this day. The way to diagnose and upkeep these systems is so much more simple on a propane vehicle over a diesel. If you are a technician in the school bus industry, you know that you're probably replacing one of these components in the lifetime of a school bus. Not to mention your turbos, your def tanks, all your differential pressure sensors, thermal tank sensors, dosing control units, your cooling units, your CAC, our charge air coolers, EGR coolers, and not to mention all the controllers that help keep that bus running, you're getting rid of. And we all know that that's a very expensive part of upkeeping a fleet. So Kaylee, if you go to the next slide, why choose, propane over diesel? I mean, I think we've made it pretty clear. The longevity of the vehicles is there. The technology is there. The savings is there. We're losing the expensive upkeep and components that has been holding, the diesel world back from really being a viable solution going forward. Not to mention, I like to touch on the safety side of it. Not a lot of people think that noise in a quieter operating engine can be a safety component, but you ask a school bus driver that is operating a newer propane vehicle coming from an older diesel vehicle and see if they notice the volume of their bus decrease on the inside of the students. And if you don't think that's a safety item, I urge you to go talk to your local school bus driver because they're big fans of this. And obviously the cold weather startup and operation makes it easy to implement into your fleet and definitely takes off a lot of headaches of your fleet management. And obviously, your drivers in the morning when they have to get in and go, be able to build that heat very quick and hold it. And then on my summary page, Kaylee, on the next one, we'd like to touch on the quality supplier. I can get you some more information on our engine suppliers, Power Solutions International. They're probably the largest engine builder that you have never heard of. They provide engines for the fleet truck market, for Schwann's. We actually use the PSI actually uses and owns the Schwann fuel system that we use on our buses now. And they build engines for all the different fork trucks used in the warehouse industry, your airport supply and ground support equipment industry. They supply all these engines and build all these engines to supply these manufacturers. So it's probably one of the largest engine manufacturers that nobody really knows about. In our application, we're going with 8.8 liter big block, and it's very like the diesel engine to where it is a low speed, high torque operating engine. So if you think about what a bus does every day, all day, stop and go, picking up children, they're not getting up to speed. They need that torque instantaneously when they're getting ready to take off. And that's what this engine in our setup provides with the 8.8 liter. And then obviously we can mate that with the Allison 2500 transmission, which everybody in the school bus industry is familiar with, has been our stalwart and our workhorse for years now. So the service side of it is very easy. You're getting a transmission that you're used to, and you're transitioning to a get a propane engine that has been around for years and is well known and easy to work on. So that pretty much sums up the equipment side of it for me. I know Steve gave us a lot of information earlier about the environmental impact, and then look forward to hearing from Mark on the fuel supply side of it and how we can help implement infrastructure into your fleet.
Thank you, Kevin. That was a great presentation.
Thank you, Kevin.
Now we're going to hear from Co-Alliance, one of the largest agribusiness, energy marketing, and supply cooperatives in the Midwest. Mark Ransom, Petroleum and LP Sales Specialist, will now lead the presentation.
Thank you, Kaylee, and thank you, Steve and Kevin, for giving us so much great information on propane autogas. You might be asking, what is Co-Alliance? Well, we're an agricultural cooperative that started back in 1937 as just a single county Farm Bureau co-ops. Years ago, Farm Bureau had a co-op in about every county. Since then, many of them have merged, and now we serve over 83 counties in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois. Co-Alliance has 4 unique divisions. We offer an energy division, an agronomy division, a swine division, and a grain division. The diversification gives us a lot of stability in today's market with all the changes that go on each and every day. Our energy division consists of both propane and liquid fuels. Our propane sales are around 30 million gallons, including farm, commercial, home heat, and auto gas. One of our biggest growing segments is that auto gas, especially with school systems. Co-Alliance provides many propane auto gas fueling options and installations. We offer cash posted pricing. We offer Opus pricing. We offer fixed price contracts, which seems to be one of our more popular when you're looking at school systems and budgets. The fixed price contract really fits well with trying to put a budget together for school systems. Some of the things we offer including on-site fueling and wet hosing if needed on bus sites. There are a lot of different infrastructure, auto gas infrastructures that we provide, many options to fit into whatever size and scale that you may need on your property. Different size tanks, both above and below ground, single hose and dual hose dispensers to get more buses fueled quicker. We offer skid mount and different components. We offer crash protection, electrical supply, and lighting. And what we try to do is fit it into the infrastructure that you have. Most generally, when we're talking about school systems, and you'll see some slides here to follow, the school systems already have a setup where they're filling and fueling their buses with diesel and gasoline. And what we try to do is provide an area where sometimes it'll fit in directly with that. And in this picture, we see a standalone dispenser that runs both sides, so you can fuel buses off both sides. The next slide will show how we would finish that off with crash protection to make sure that we don't run into any issues with school buses hitting that propane tank. In the middle there, you see a card reader system. Most school bus systems have card reader systems that will run your diesel and your gasoline fleets. We just merge the propane right in the middle of that, and then you can use your card system to run your propanes along with your other fuels. This is a single unit. The next picture would be a dual unit. We've got some buses, corporations around Indianapolis that are running 50 or more buses. We have some running as few as 5 to 10, and each year they continue to grow. Here's a picture of one where we've set our propane just off to the side where the buses can get in both sides to fuel the diesels, but then they can come down one lane and fill our propane through our propane tanks. Very similar to the way gasoline and diesel, the propane is basically just a hose and a nozzle, and that hose and nozzle stick in there and fill up just like you would. There's a little bit that we will come out and do some education on to make sure that fitting is correct, and the drivers know exactly how to put that in there so that they get the maximum amount of propane in their buses. Different types, like I said, we've got some on skids, some we've placed in certain places, and then as the school system grows, we'll move them around for them to try to help them as they increase their propane buses. We may go from a smaller single tank to a larger tank. Just a lot of different options that we have available to school systems so that they don't have a lot of extra cost in the infrastructure of putting in tanks and providing propane gas as compared to what the infrastructure is in a lot of these places to provide liquid fuels like diesel and gasoline. So you can see here we've extended on the end of one of the fuel islands. We've put bumpers around it. Those are fairly inexpensive bumpers. Like I said, this is all movable down the road if they need to, or it can be set up permanently. However, we need to work with these school systems. We want to provide options so that they can grow in their propane business. One of our fleet success stories has been Avon Community School Corporation. They did an analysis of costs and effectiveness of propane buses, and as you heard from Steve and Kevin, they've seen a pretty good success in savings from the cost of propane all the way down to the cost of maintenance on their buses. They did a great job of explaining to you the difference in running diesels and the equipment that especially the DEF equipment that is now required on all diesels to going to propane, and it seems to be a significant cost advantage as you run propane longer. So as I said earlier, we may have some school bus corporations that are starting out with 4 or 5 buses. We have some that are all the way up to 50. We want to find a way to work with you so that we can make it efficient for you and cost effective as you plan to either grow your propane buses or get into propane buses and see if it's something that you will do in the future. We found a lot of communities really like the energy efficiency and the green aspect of propane buses, and it seems to be something that the school systems have been able to work with their communities and say, hey, this is a way that we can help the community and we can help the environment. And you get a lot of good publicity from going to propane, and you get a lot of people in the community that have been very supportive. With that, I'll turn it back over to Kaylee. I appreciate it. If you have any questions on propane supply, you can reach out to myself or Mike Hayden, our propane manager, and we'd be glad to help and answer any questions we can.
Thank you, Mark. That was great. So now we're going to move into the question and answer portion of the session. So remember to submit any questions into the Q&A box. But to start, I believe, Steve, you said you had a couple questions for the other panelists.
Well, I did. I wanted to start with Kevin, if I could. The 0.02 NOx engine on that 8.8, you're taking orders for those now, which are going to be compliant through 2027. So you're getting way ahead of the game when it comes to meeting and exceeding those emission reductions. But I was curious, do you have any information on the timing and the cost of your electric type C bus?
Well, I don't know if you guys have seen any of the press releases here recently. We just concluded a ride and drive out in California with rave reviews. I think STN even covered it in their publication here recently. We are already IC is working on producing probably, I think, first quarter of 22 right now is what we're looking at of delivering units. So it went very well, and we're extremely excited about it, being able to increase the range and then also offering a dual point charging system for our electric bus.
Mm-hmm. Are there any cost projections on that? I have some costs, but I like to try and keep track of those. Are there any projections yet of what that might cost?
Honestly, we have not looked into it here in Indiana yet. We have to fine tune it towards this state, obviously, but it's going to be right in line, obviously, with what you have been seeing, I would say.
Okay. I didn't know if anybody was coming up with anything, significantly, different. I'd like to keep my finger on the pulse of that, so I can have all my comparisons be accurate. So thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Mark, I did have one question for you. What about the paratransits in your group, the regional transit authorities and those that are complying with the American with Disabilities Act, moving folks around in counties? Have you guys had much penetration for supplying them with fuel and infrastructure?
I think that's something that's just kind of starting in our areas. I think the success that we've seen in school buses is starting to translate over to other government agencies, and they're starting to really look at viable options with propane. So we're excited that that's another growth opportunity for us in this area.
Well, when you're ready to start identifying some of those, I don't know if you've heard, but the Propane Education Research Council, we recently developed a tool for identifying every paratransit in the United States, and it identifies, how many vehicles they have running on gasoline, diesel, propane, natural gas, and all those, and their locations and the number of vehicles that they have. So if you'd like to take a peek at that, I'd be happy to show it to you, because I'd love for you to expand in that area for paratransit, not just to add gallons to your bottom line, but also to move the needle in community adoption, and everybody gets the environmental justice in those particular areas of cleaner emissions.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No worries at all. Sorry, I didn't mean, Kayla, to bogart it. I'll let others ask questions as well.
No problem. So, Kevin, I know you had mentioned you had regular school buses, but you also had the smaller school buses. Can you touch on those as well?
Well, yeah, I'll actually put my company hat on. We actually just don't do school bus. We obviously do church bus, and we do childcare and also public transit as well at the city level. So, Steve, when you talk about that list of paratransportation, that'd be something we'd be interested in as well, because we obviously offer a propane option in our city transport buses as well. So we offer, any in the school bus side, we do Type A, which is your mini buses that you see running around. Your Type Cs, which would be your conventional style school buses, and obviously our Type D, which is your transit style buses. But the transit style buses to this date are still all diesel powered vehicles.
Great, thank you. And we're not seeing any other questions in here yet. So, Steve, if you had any others, you can feel free to ask them.
Well, I'm going to put Mark on the spot here a little bit. You guys have been fueling a lot of buses and moving this great fuel and other transportation. How much of it does your organization actually get to use itself? You guys have a plan for your own vehicles being able to do this as well?
Yeah, we're I think going to start in our propane division first, and then work into. We do a lot of tank wagon delivery on fuel to farmers and even school systems and people that don't take full semi loads of fuel. And so those are options that we're looking at in the future, is switching a lot of our fleet over. to propane.
Sure, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of great options for that too. Like what Kevin's doing with the 8.8 liter, going in the class 7, for that full 33,000 GVW, works really well. There's also a Ford solution on the 7.3 now with their new rollout, as well as Agility with their 8.0. I mean, there's quite a few out there, but not just for the class 7, but also for the class 5. A lot of the tank setters that you have that are setting tanks and moving them around and whatnot, on that. We're seeing some great success there. And I did a case study of those F550s, a 5-year case study on 2 diesel and 2 propane. And some of them had to have some significant diesel, and some of them didn't. But it ended up being a 27-cent differential over the 5 years of propane to diesel. So be happy to point you in the right direction so that you get the benefits of those as well.
Appreciate that.
I couldn't resist.
Hey, Mark, I did want to ask a question as well. Mainly, as lead time, I didn't really touch on too much. When a customer puts in an order to the point to where they would take delivery, on the school bus side, it's anywhere from 4 to 5 months. What is the turnaround time for a customer to, say, get infrastructure installed, up and running, and ready to use?
We had one project that started this summer that was less than 30 days, and that was the full size tank that they requested. Like I said, we have lots of options with putting smaller tanks in or wet hosing till equipment gets set. Sometimes we prefer to put a smaller tank in the beginning so you can figure out where it works best in the way you're going to fuel and the way you're going to operate and move buses in and out. So we try to give these customers as much flexibility as we can with and options so that when they finally decide where they want to put their equipment, it's in the right place for them.
Kevin, I'll add to that as well. It's not going to be Mark and his equipment and setting it all up. Most of the lead time gets gobbled up in the permitting. If you're in an area where the jurisdiction is familiar with propane autogas, it goes pretty quick because they've already gone through it and they know it. And, oh, okay, and get it all set and make it good. But if it's a first timer, then we're walking through the regulatory folks to get everything set up and make it good. But Mark, when I was actually doing some of these paratransits myself before I was at PERC, my fastest one, and I certainly wouldn't want to use this as a standard to have to repeat, but I met with their county board of supervisors on Friday evening. And I'd been working with their fleet director for a long time, and they finally voted and said yes for 10 of their cutaways, their shuttles, for their paratransit. And so we literally did conversions of those 10 vehicles that weekend. Okay. And I just happened to have a skid mounted system that I dropped in and had ready to go on Thursday, and was tapping my foot waiting on their electrician to provide that 220 30 amp circuit to plug it in. So within, from Friday night to Thursday afternoon, we had 10 vehicles pumping fuel. Now that, I don't think that could ever be repeated. It was just the stars aligning all together. But it is, it's compared to others, it's a very simple process to do.
Yeah, I would definitely touch on that. That is phenomenal, even not to expect it going to install future of our customers.
No, I don't. That bar. I was a high jumper in college, okay, and so I was pretty good at clearing the bar and meeting the expectation. But I tell you what, I wouldn't want to have to set that bar up again to try. but we usually beat lead times for manufacturers of school buses as well as commercial vehicles. We're usually able to beat that lead time unless there's a snag on some of the regulatory permitting, especially in metropolitan dense areas. It seems to be a little bit longer there than it is in some of the more rural areas.
Great info.
Yeah.
All right,
Haley,
well, thank you. We haven't received any other questions, no.
Okay, well, very good, very good. We can give people 20 minutes of their life back easy.
Yes. All right, so that's going to conclude our webinar for the day. Thank you to everyone who joined us, and a special thank you to our speakers, Stephen, Kevin, and Mark, for giving us an overview of propane, its uses in buses, infrastructure options, and incentives. Should anyone have any follow-ups or questions, please feel free to reach out to us at Greater Indiana Clean Cities at the contact information on this slide. Our website also has more information and resources, including signing up for our newsletter. Also, please remember to take our quick 2-minute survey so we can make sure that we continue to plan webinars of value to our stakeholders. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks, Kaylee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Bye.